Hello, how are you? My name is Luke Stokes. It is Monday, April 8th, 2024, and I'm going to give a talk on Bitcoin. I'm wearing my old school Bitcoin miner t-shirt for this one. And yeah, I gave a talk around 11 years ago about how Bitcoin was going to be more disruptive than the internet. And although we haven't seen that completely come true, we're getting closer and closer with BlackRock and Fidelity and large institutions recognizing that Bitcoin is very important. And I was recently asked to give a talk at the Tech My School Spring Teachers Conference that just took place here in Puerto Rico. And I figured I'd go ahead and record that talk as well and put it out there like I did actually more than 11 years ago now. So here we are. I'm going to record that. Let me go share my screen and we'll jump right into it. And again, this is a talk I just recently gave, and I wanted to go ahead and put it out there for everybody else to enjoy as well. Again, huge shout out to Tech My School. Robbie and Irina do an amazing job. If you're looking for a nonprofit to support, they do incredible work in Puerto Rico. I think they're helping over 15 schools now. And I mean, they're just amazing. Check them out. They put on this incredible conference, making it free for their member schools. And it was awesome. And it was an honor for myself to be there. My wife did the photography for the event, and it was phenomenal. It was just this past weekend. So here we go. Let's get started. The title for this is Those Who Understand Bitcoin Define the Future. And the intention, again, is the audience for this was initially the teachers who have a whole bunch of students that they're responsible for. And I wanted to impart to them the importance of what Bitcoin is, why it matters. We're going to touch on the history of money a little bit. Because this was done in Puerto Rico, the second half of these slides are in Spanish. Unfortunately, it's Google Translate Spanish. It's not the best yet. I'm still learning. But if you speak Spanish, go ahead and hit that link, TMS-Bitcoin off of bit.ly, bit.ly, or scan that QR code and you can jump right to these slides in Spanish, starting at slide 37. We'll start off with who the heck is this guy and why should we listen to him? My name is Luke Stokes. As I said, I have an Ivy League degree, which is important to educators, so I had to throw that in there. Computer science engineering at the University of Pennsylvania, class 2001. I've been developing web software since the late 90s. I developed a company called FoxyCart with a buddy of mine. I wrote most of the software, and it was it's still going today. It's Foxy.io. It's a web payments company that we worked on for 10 years together before I went full-time in the space in 2018. So I'm very familiar with the payment gateways, the acquirers, the merchant accounts, the credit card companies, the entire payment rails for the traditional financial system when people make payments. And that led into my interest in getting into cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. I purchased my first Bitcoin in January of 2013 when it was 20 bucks a piece. So I threw 50 bucks in there, just kind of figured, hey, you know, learning about some weird tech I don't understand, I'm willing to lose this money. Obviously, that was a great investment. And so I started to kind of develop my interest even more, and off to the races we went. This is a picture of my family taken just this past December. I've got a beautiful wife of 20 plus years and 3 wonderful children that we homeschool here in Puerto Rico. So we're going to talk about what is money. In my 11 years of educating people about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, the number one resistance I've found from almost everyone is that they don't actually understand what money is. They'll ask questions like, well, what is Bitcoin backed by? Or, you know, who says that it has value? And these are, in my opinion, fundamental misunderstandings of money itself. And so I want to clear that up a little bit and create an opportunity for all of you to kind of really get what money is, why it matters, why it's important. And we're going to talk about, is it broken? And then what is Bitcoin in that context? Why does Bitcoin matter? And then hopefully I'll leave you with some important technology tools that'll be relevant as of the recording in 2024, but hopefully they'll remain relevant as well into the future. So you can have some practical things to take away from this. So what is money? In the very beginning of money, if you go back far enough, you recognize that money has always been a record or ledger for keeping track of credits and debits. A lot of people think that, you know, originally it was all about bartering and people had this like immediacy of shared needs. And it was like, oh, I happen to want wheat. Right as you're having to slaughter your cow. So let's do a barter trade. But in actuality, from the research I've done and the books I've read, it's more common that there was a record kept of a credit and a debit, meaning, hey, 6 months ago, when I slaughtered my cow and I gave you some ribs, you remember that, right? Well, I see that you're about to slaughter your pigs. I'd like some pork. Let's make a trade. And so it really didn't matter what token was used, what type of anything was used to keep that memory alive between the participants in an exchange of value. And so there have been shells as money. There have been tally sticks pictured here, which are kind of fun. They actually were these two sticks that were notched in a very specific way and broken so that both the creditor and the debtor would have the exact history of how much is owed. And as the credits and debits were cleared and paid off, parts of the sticks would be equally broken. And so they'd have a record to keep track of who owns what to who. And again, these sticks could actually be transferred. The debts and credits could be transferred to others as well. And then my favorite story, of course, is the Raya stones on Yap Island. This is the picture of this gigantic stone here. Now, if you've seen other pictures of this, there's like literally a human being standing next to these. They're giant. They don't actually trade hands. They just sit there on the island, and everyone in that community understands that that is just a shared story as to who owns it. They have this kind of mental ledger that they keep track of. Oh, that stone in front of so-and-so's house is currently owned by this person. And this kind of reinforces the idea that money has always been this kind of shared ledger, this shared understanding between a community. Another interesting example of the Raya stones, or Rhea stones, however you're supposed to say that, was an example where one of them was on a ship and the ship sunk. So the stone is nowhere to be seen. No one can physically see it. And yet it kept functioning as money. So even though it wasn't actually physical in the sense that, anyone could just touch it, feel it, look at it, see it, all that, it would still transfer back and forth between different owners as value was exchanged. So I think that's a really interesting example of very early on how people were to understand that money doesn't necessarily have to be a physical thing. It's a shared story. It's a consensus story. And my thesis is essentially that all money, all financial value even, is just a shared consensus story. It's a group of people that believe something has value and is exchangeable for value. And when that story falls apart, the money itself becomes useless. It becomes worthless, useless, doesn't actually function as money. It's the story itself and the large group of people that believe in that story that make it real. So what happens when the story falls apart? Well, we saw that in the Weimar Republic. Hyperinflation. You see here in this picture, just stacks and stacks and stacks of dollar bill money. They're Deutschmarks. And like this idea that this money, you had to spend it as quickly as possible. And you may have seen pictures of people using wheelbarrows as they go and buy food and bread because the inflation was so out of control. It was happening so quickly that they needed to get rid of their money as quickly as possible. So what does this result in? This results in hyper consumerism. This results in malinvestment. This results in all kinds of bad ideas. And then in a more recent example, of course, we have Venezuela, 305% inflation as early as 2022, just not that long ago. And this highlights the idea that inflation is this hidden tax. It's a theft against your purchasing power and your savings. As more and more currency is created, it steals from the currency that's already in circulation, that already exists. And it's very, very detrimental. This graph shows the purchasing power of the US dollar over the last 100 or so years. And you can see it's lost a tremendous amount of its purchasing power. And notably, it highlights all the different wars that were involved as well. As you can start to imagine, currency that you can just print out of nothing is very handy when you want to go to war and pay for things like bombs. So what is this type of money? It's called fiat money by government decree. It's backed by nothing. It's not convertible to gold or any other asset. And around 1971 is when the US dollar, the world reserve currency, officially became full fiat. Prior to 1971 and the Nixon shock, you could actually take US certificates of money and you could exchange them for real gold. You could go to a Federal Reserve office and get gold. And that was before my time. I was born in 79. But the idea is there, and it's important because prior to that, it was what people would consider more sound money. Now, again, gold and silver, those are just other stories, just like all financial value, but they were a little bit more tried and true stories. Have been around for 5,000 years, for example. So once this went full fiat, we had some trouble. Historically, there have been over 700 fiat currencies. The average lifespan is around 30-something years. And that, when I say that, I mean they literally go to zero. And so we're kind of on borrowed time here since 1971 with regards to the US dollar. Now, one of the reasons, as you can see here, just trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars are being printed. This graph just shows back to 1960. This, again, is a theft. This is stealing from your savings. This is stealing from your ability to decide what you want to do with your money. Like when this is happening and you're not in a yield producing or interest bearing investment, you're literally losing purchasing power. And so this is not ideal. So banks, a lot of people sometimes get this confused and think, it's just the government printing money. Well, banks also print money. The way the banking system works today is that banks lend out money to create money. So when you go to the bank and you deposit your money, and most people know this nowadays, but for a long time, this was not common knowledge. Your money doesn't actually sit in some big, gigantic vault. They don't take that money and put it there and save it for you when you want to come and take it out again. What they do is they lend it out. And they used to lend it out according to the fractional reserve lending ratio. This fractional reserve lending basically meant for every amount of dollar that they had, they could lend out, and it used to be 9 to 1, they could lend out 9 times more. And they could redo that over and over again, 9 to 1 ratio. So as the money would circulate through the economy and get deposited back in that bank, they could lend it out again and lend it out again and lend it out again. And it just got pretty crazy, as you could imagine, because then there's a whole bunch of debt and there's not actually enough currency to even pay down the debt or even just the interest. And now in most countries that are being influenced by the US dollar as the world reserve currency, there's no reserve ratio at all. From the Wikipedia for fractional reserve banking, in countries where the central bank does not impose a reserve requirement, such as the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom, the theoretical money multiplier is undefined, having a denominator of 0. If you understand math, you know that's not a good thing. And what they mean by the money multiplier, it's a way to determine how much money banks can create with the fractional reserve ratio, which again, we don't have here in the United States. So what can we do about this? You see here this on the bottom, I guess it'd be your left or bottom right of your screen. There's the reserve currency status, doesn't last forever. The United States dollar is currently the world reserve currency, but prior to Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944, that was the British pound. So just having the status of the world reserve currency doesn't guarantee that you will remain as the world reserve currency. And if you look at like Zimbabwe, for example, and this picture here represents 100 trillion Zimbabwe dollars, that's how insane things can get. They can just keep printing and printing and printing until the money is literally trash in the streets. I've seen pictures of old currency just sitting there, filling up a gutter, and no one even bothers to go and pick them up because they're just worthless. The currency is worthless. It's been hyperinflated so badly. So the measuring stick of value itself, when people actually leave their families, leave their leisure activities, go out and work a job to earn money so that they can do what they want to do in life, that measuring stick of value has been broken. When they go to buy something, they think that it's going to be a value exchange for the amount of work that they created and the value they created for someone else. But in reality, they're measuring in dollars, and those dollars are broken. And so Bitcoin represents something fundamentally important, which is the separation of money and state. Just like the separation of church and state was extremely important, and people were able to worship God however they want with their own freedom and sovereignty. We're now going to eventually have the separation of money and state, where people can use money as a form of expression. They can use whatever currency they want as a form of expression without anyone in the state telling them with the threats of violence how they can do that. And so when we look about the situation that we're in today, the demographics of the world, this kind of onshoring that we're seeing a lot of people do, a lot of countries and nation states. We're seeing in the United States in some ways pull back from being kind of the world police and having to police the world and wanting to pull back energy production and manufacturing more to the border of the United States. What that also implies is they're not going to have as many benefits of being the world reserve currency as far as their trade deficits with other countries. And so all these things coming together might indicate that they don't want to be the world reserve currency much longer, but at the same time, they can't give that power over to another nation state. That would be not into their interest either. So there are some people who theorize that what they're eventually going to do is give this power of world reserve currency status basically to physics and math. Basically give it over to something like Bitcoin, if not Bitcoin itself. And that way, a known issuance, uncontrolled by any politician or bank, will become the norm for how we measure financial value. And if there's even a tiny chance that this is possible, it's extremely important for our children to be aware of this and for us to be aware of this as we prepare them for the future. This is a huge deal. This is the largest wealth transfer in history if it takes place, as many believe it will, and is already taking place. So I'm going to start off with some quotes to, again, underpin how important this control and issuance of money is. History records that the money changers have used every form of abuse, intrigue, deceit, and violent means possible to maintain their control over governments by controlling money and its issuance. James Madison. These are some of the founders of our country. Whoever controls the volume of money in any country is absolute master of all industry and commerce. James A. Garfield. I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. The issuing power of money should be taken away from the banks and restored to the people to whom it properly belongs. Thomas Jefferson. So what is Bitcoin? In this context, does Bitcoin matter? Well, I view Bitcoin as a tool for global nonviolent consensus. This is the first time that humans have been able to come together and agree on truth without having to use threats of violence, without having to say, this is what's true, you got to believe us, or else we're going to park aircraft carriers off of your coast and launch Tomahawk missiles at you. A lot of consensus building throughout history has been done by the victors of war. And in this case, when we're talking about, did something really happen? Is something really true? Did these finances transfer from this ownership to that ownership? This is what Bitcoin provides, a mechanism for truth, a shared story, given that's what value is, for determining what's real. And it really is the best ledger for credits and debits ever invented. Due to its cryptographic nature, its decentralization, no single point of failure, its resilience, the game theory dynamics, the rewards paid out to those who validate the network, the Byzantine generals problem, and how it solves that, the fault tolerance, so much about it really does make it the best ledger ever. And therefore, if money has always been a ledger, this is the best form of money ever invented. And it has built into it what's called triple entry accounting. So if you're familiar with double entry accounting, you have a record of credits and debits, and you kind of add those up together on both sides to make sure that no money was lost when you're transferring from one account to another, or you're recording credits and debits. With the Bitcoin network, you actually have a validation and verification layer on each and every transaction. So every single node in the system is verifying that the transactions that are being promoted to that system are valid. And that's extremely important, because prior to that, you had third-party counter risk, you had centralized authorities that would have to approve that a transaction was valid. And it's also verifiable digital ownership without fraudulent duplication. This is really important. For example, if I was to sell this phone and say, hey, here's my phone, someone else would grab it and say, okay, now I'm the owner of the phone, and everyone could see that. But if I sell you a picture of this phone, there's no way for you to easily understand whether or not I just sold 50 other copies of that picture prior to selling it to you. How do you know that you have the one and the only real picture of that phone? And that's, again, what the Bitcoin blockchain and other cryptocurrency blockchains provide. It's a cryptographic proof that there is one and only one of either a digital item, such as an NFT, or a token, an amount of tokens. When those tokens are transferred, you have a verifiable proof that no one else also were sent those tokens prior to you. So you are the real validated owner of that property. So the Bitcoin network, when you see Bitcoin with a big B, it's a network of computers. And if you see Bitcoin with little b, that is the currency or token used to transact on that network. There's over 50 million terahashes a second of computing power securing the Bitcoin network, distributed all over the world and controlled by no central authority. I won't get into the details of mining, but there's a link that I'll include in the description of this video that has a video that explains exactly, if you just understand the hashing concept, this technical term, then you can really understand exactly how the Bitcoin blockchain works and how these groups of transactions are put together in a block, and how those blocks are then secured and connected to each other in a chain of truth. It's really phenomenal. And the reason I mentioned this 50 million terahashes is it's always increasing. Over time, that number will be considered small, surprisingly. And it's just incredible how much power is securing this network. Nation states at this stage cannot overpower the network using computer power. It's just not possible with how many people are running their own mining equipment. So the transactions on the network are validated by the network in what's called a block, and that happens around every 10 minutes. There's something called the difficulty setting that gets readjusted every 2 weeks. So essentially, it kind of keeps it within that range. If a whole bunch of more miners come into the industry and start mining, so there's a lot more hash power going on, then the difficulty will reset and essentially make it harder for those miners to keep it around 10 minutes when somebody solves a block or validates a group of transactions in the appropriate way. And vice versa, if a whole bunch of people drop out, such as this month in April, we have the next halvening, and it may become too cost prohibitive for some miners. So the difficulty might change. It might go down even. And if that was the case, again, the difficulty reset would adjust for that every 2 weeks. So the block reward is part of the economic incentive that secures the network. Whenever a block of transactions is validated and put onto the network, there's a reward given out to the miner who solved that difficult math problem, basically this hashing algorithm problem, in order to validate those transactions and put them on the network. It started out with 50 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. Then every 4 years later, it went down to 25 Bitcoin, then to 12.5, then to 6.5. And then this month, as I'm recording in April of 2024, it's going to go down to 3 1/8, 3.125 Bitcoin released every 10 minutes. So if you understand the basics of supply and demand, you'll recognize that as you decrease the supply of something that is increasing in demand, you're going to be getting what's called a supply shock. And that's why you get people predicting incredible amounts, up to $18 million per Bitcoin, because of these demands in the supply and demand curve related to the decreasing supply. And this also points out that there's no bank, there's no government, there's no individual controlling the issuance of new Bitcoin and the distribution of new Bitcoin. It's completely done in a distributed, decentralized, and fair manner. So again, issuance is very important. The Bitcoin network distributes new Bitcoin according to physics and math, not according to the whims of politicians and bankers. Unlike the Nixon shock in 1971, which we discussed, new money can't be created out of thin air just to fund a war like Vietnam. And also, there's a limited supply of Bitcoin. There's never going to be more than 21 million. And that creates a deflationary price value in US dollar terms. This graph is a little bit difficult to see, but you can see here it's on a logarithmic scale. So this is here in 2011, $2.50 up to $1,000, then down to $270, up to $2,500, $6,300, $55,000, and who knows what it's going to be here. So you can see there's this pattern of, after the halvening, a nice rise in US dollar value equivalent purchasing price. And we've seen that pretty much every time. We're already at an all-time high prior to the halvening, which is kind of amazing and has never happened before. So no one's really sure what's going to happen as far as where it's eventually going to go. And also, it's important to mention with that 21 million, many of those have been lost. A lot of the owners of those those tokens have lost their private keys and can no longer access them. So Bitcoin is essentially a life raft. The financial world is sinking, and Bitcoin is a way off that sinking ship. The current rate of inflation and interest on debt is entirely unsustainable. And although Bitcoin price action in US dollar terms is very volatile, if you even just look at the yearly lows, it's still one of the best stores of value or investments in history. And those who don't understand money will be controlled by those who do. This is a historical fact. Our children deserve an education that includes the nature of money and how it is changing because of Bitcoin. I really hope that you can share this if you're a parent with your kids. You can share this if you're an educator with your kids, because this is information that's not generally taught in schools. Essentially, those who control the world are not very interested in empowering those with information that might basically take away the power they have to continue controlling the world. So that's one of the reasons I'm very passionate and have been for over a decade to get this information out there, because it really, really is important. So again, the traditional financial system, you have this centralized third-party risk. You have to trust your bank, your government, your credit card company. You have to trust a central clearinghouse to be able to clear your check when you write a check. And in all of these systems, again, with my history in the payment industry, there's middlemen taking cuts. There's different manipulations that can go on. And it's essentially, in some ways, considered a Ponzi, a fraudulent system, because those who are closest to the issuance of money, those who have seigniorage of money, have a much greater advantage than those who feel the impacts after the inflation takes place and the money starts to circulate in the economy. With Bitcoin, there's no third-party risk. If you control the risk within an area, you control the credit. And as we were talking about in those quotes, that implies that if you can control the credit, you then can control the money supply. The interest rates in the credit determine how much money is printed. And if you can control the money supply, you ultimately can control the people. And these are reasons why Bitcoin, I say, is a tool of freedom. It's a tool for self-sovereign control of your own value without having to trust or get permission from anyone. And that's very important. So this here is the Bitcoin price chart in US dollar terms, going back to 2013. I don't know if you can see on my mouse, but back here, January 2013, that's about when I first purchased. And I've been riding this roller coaster ever since. I've been telling people about it the whole time. I remember when it went from $120 down to $50. I remember when it went to $1,100 down to $200 or $300, $250, I think it was. And then when it went to $19,000 and then crashed down to, what was it, $1,300. And then it went to $69,000 and crashed down to 13,000 or 3,300. Yeah, it just, all of these numbers, it just like up and down and up and down, up and down. And as you can see now, we've gone up over $70,000 now. I agree it is volatile, but again, if you look at the yearly lows, it is still one of the best investments of all time. And it's important to remember, again, that, the value, the price in Bitcoin isn't the most important thing. A lot of people focus on the price. They get all excited when Bitcoin prices up. There's a lot more interest in Bitcoin. But really, what's important is that it's a decentralized ledger, uncontrolled by anyone and secured by open source cryptography software. Bitcoin allows, for the first time in history, for humans to coordinate and come to consensus on what is true without using threats of violence. That's what makes it so important. And again, I have a whole history since the late 90s of working in open source and working with software. If there's an issue with Bitcoin, such as quantum computing or this concerns that it's going to be hackable at some level, all of these things can be resolved due to the nature of open source. And I've been helped launch multiple crypto blockchain networks. So I'm familiar with being a validator on these networks. When sometimes the software isn't working as expected, the community comes together. Sometimes they even can freeze the chain, update the software, redeploy, and keep going. So I have a lot of confidence with my whole career in open source technology to know that these things can be updated in real time as needed, such as quantum resistance or anything else that we might need to come up with. So in US dollar terms, the price of one Bitcoin is currently around 67,000. Actually, it's closer to 70,000. Let me see what it says. Okay, 71,699. So it's even gone up since I did these slides just a few days ago. And it's important to note that that's not just a measurement of the price of Bitcoin. It's actually also a measurement in the decrease in purchasing power of the US dollar. So when people say it's going to be, $1 million of Bitcoin or $10 million of Bitcoin, they're not really also, they're also communicating the decrease in purchasing power of the US dollar. It's important to keep in mind. As we've already mentioned, the Bitcoin supply is limited. There'll never be more than 21 million Bitcoin. And as I stated, many of them are lost forever. The owner no longer controls the private key needed to use those Bitcoin. So they're just going to sit there unmoving, unavailable. Also, too, this is a really important point, and I hope people hear this, because many people who've heard about Bitcoin are unfamiliar with this, and they think they have to own an entire coin or an entire Bitcoin, and that is not at all the case. There are 100 million divisions, 100 million Satoshis in every Bitcoin. What that means is each Bitcoin is divisible up to 8 decimal places. You can own $5 in Bitcoin, which is around 0.00007 something. You don't have to own an entire Bitcoin. So value in Bitcoin, one way to illustrate this relates to the price of a home. In 2016, the average price of a home in the United States is around $280,000 or 600 something Bitcoin. 4 years later, after the next halving, it's 328,000. So you might think, oh man, good investment. My home is worth more money now. But in reality, it's only 45 Bitcoin. And then fast forward to this year, $434,000. Only 6.6 Bitcoin. So even though an investment might make sense in US dollar terms, you might be actually losing a tremendous amount of purchasing power in Bitcoin terms. And I do believe in the future, more and more things are going to be priced in Bitcoin. And there's not enough Bitcoin in the world for every millionaire to own a single Bitcoin. That's pretty important to think about. We have gigantic financial institutions like BlackRock, Fidelity, and others now participating in the Bitcoin ecosystem with the ETFs that were recently approved. And so now you can essentially purchase Bitcoin, or at least Bitcoin exposure, just like you would go to your broker and purchase a stock. And so all of this stuff is really important when you think about the broken measuring stick of financial value, the way money itself has been broken for a long time, a lot of assets have become monetized. So for example, real estate has a premium because investors are using it as a form of money, as a place to store their value. Because of inflation, they have to get some type of return, whether that's rent or mortgage payments or something to kind of offset the loss in their purchasing power due to inflation. So that's why you see a premium in a lot of assets, including stocks and bonds and real estate, all of these. And so there's many who believe as more and more people recognize how much of a superior form of monetary value Bitcoin is, then they will start to transition out of these other assets classes and into Bitcoin. That will hopefully free up homes to be used for their actual purpose, not as money, but as dwellings for humans, and basically stop all this malinvestment and this chasing after returns and yield, and get people to more focus on sound money again. So recap, all financial value, including money, is a shared consensus story. When that story gets distorted or manipulated, as is the case with fiat currency, trust in the purchasing power of that money can fail. Inflation steals from our purchasing power, and Bitcoin fixes this by having a fixed number of tokens that will ever exist, a transparent ledger of validated transactions, and a known issuance rate to avoid the problems of too much inflation. It's a tool for freedom, global nonviolent consensus, and the separation of money and the state. Fiat money is broken. Trillions of US dollars are being created out of nothing every single year, and that steals from our savings and purchasing power. Bitcoin fixes this, fixes broken money. And if we agree that money has always been a ledger, then Bitcoin is the best, most secure ledger ever invented. Therefore, it is the best form of money that we currently have. And our children need this education. There's a massive transfer of wealth taking place, and the future well-being of our children is directly impacted by their financial education and the history and future of money. And I do believe Bitcoin is an important part of that future. So it's very important, again, to recognize that inflation is happening every single moment of every single day, and it is a theft for the future. They're stealing our well-being through inflation. So how can you own Bitcoin? Let's get a bit practical. If you've followed me this far and you agree that money is broken and you agree that Bitcoin is a great form of money, as a great ledger, then let's get practical. How can you actually own some? Like any currency, you can get Bitcoin just by converting with a different currency. And you can do that via an exchange or earning it through labor or sales of something that you have to anyone who's willing to pay you in that specific currency. So if you're going to Mexico, for example, you go and use an exchange, and now you get your pesos that are usable in Mexico. Same situation here. Coinbase is a popular exchange you can safely connect your bank account to and use. I got a little typo there. And once you do that and you get that money in Coinbase, I recommend getting it off that exchange and going to what's called a wallet. A Bitcoin wallet is where you store your Bitcoin currency. Your wallet essentially has a password or private key that gives you control of the Bitcoin which exists at your Bitcoin address. And I'll get into this a little bit more in the next couple slides, but the essential idea is the money doesn't exist in your wallet as much as your wallet displays the balance of a public address on the ledger. The globally distributed Bitcoin ledger will have a public address that you control because you have the associated private key to that address. And when someone sends cryptocurrency Bitcoin to that public address, you're the only one that can move it and send it to someone else. So you own it, you control it because of your private key. And so rule number one in crypto is not your keys, not your coins. And what this means is if you don't have a self-sovereign, non-custodial wallet where you control the private key, then you don't really own the Bitcoin. For example, if you leave it on a centralized exchange like Coinbase, then essentially they own the private key, and you're hoping someday they'll send you the crypto when you ask for it. But as we saw with Mt. Gox, as we saw with FTX, as we see with all these different centralized cryptocurrency companies, they're basically doing the same exact thing that traditional financial industries have done, where they're lending out fractions of what they own. They're creating situations where the money that they contain is not the actual money that's on their books, and these things implode and collapse. So it's very, very important that if you actually want to own Bitcoin, that you have control of the private key where the Bitcoin is stored. So again, owning Bitcoin involves a public Bitcoin address, and that is kind of like your safe. And it's sitting there, it's like a bucket, a container, a safe out on the global ledger, and you are the one that has the combination or private key to that safe. You're the only one that can open it and move it somewhere else. So to own Bitcoin, it means to have someone send Bitcoin to an address that you've created in your wallet and that you control. And so this is kind of what a Bitcoin address looks like. It's a big string of crazy letters and characters. And I didn't put in this presentation, but if you go to FIO.net, you can see a project that I've worked with for over 4 years now called the FIO protocol, the Foundation for Inter-Wallet Operability. And we're trying to make this a little bit easier. So instead of big, crazy addresses like this, you can use, for example, Luke@Stokes, and you can send any crypto you want, and that'll map to the appropriate address on the public blockchain that you want to send to. So there are a lot of tools like that. We're integrated, I think, in almost 80 different wallets and exchanges now. So if you're interested in that, you want to get your own crypto handle, check out FIO.net. So you don't have to just use, big addresses like this. Now, you can also use QR codes to make it a little bit easier, but unfortunately, these are not encrypted. So when you kind of scan it with your phone, you don't exactly know, unless you double check, that address you're being shown is the same address that's encoded into the QR code. So whenever you use that, just double check that it's the correct address. Or again, use a FIO request and use FIO. So the different types of wallets, this is important. A custodial wallet is where the private keys are controlled by custodians. So that means, you're trusting someone else to control the Bitcoin for you. So again, with a centralized exchange like Coinbase, that's the situation. You're trusting a custodian, and that does violate rule number 1. So the exchanges are not really, if you leave it on an exchange, you're not really owning cryptocurrency. And so use the exchanges for exchanging, not for owning. Now, the second type is a non-custodial wallet. This type of wallet, such as the Hedge wallet or Bitcoin Libre, exists on your phone or your computer, and it gives you full control of your funds. You own the private key, which controls the funds without a custodian. It's very important that you back that up, and we'll get into how to do that in a minute, but it is digital money, meaning just like a dollar bill, if you leave it on the ground and lose it, it's gone forever. There's no chargebacks, there's no customer support you can call, there's nobody that can get you that money back. If you have a Bitcoin wallet on your phone and your phone gets destroyed, or you lose your phone and you didn't back up that wallet, then you lost your money. So there's a lot of responsibility required to storing your own cryptocurrency on a non-custodial wallet. And it's important that you understand that. It's important that you take on the responsibility of self-sovereignty of your money. Now, there are great tools which make that easier. We'll get to that in a second. And then thirdly is a hardware wallet. If you are storing significant amounts of money, like this is part of your savings, for example, you definitely want to get a hardware wallet. A hardware wallet is a specific device that you plug into your computer, and that hardware device has a little screen on it where you can validate transactions you want to send. And the signing of those messages, basically the password to your safe, the combination to your safe, is stored on that physical device. So you have a lot of security that you can plug it into any other computer and not worry about somebody hacking you or something like that, because the physical device can't be messed with. And so you have a lot of more security there. You can validate the amount you want to send and the address you want to send to using that physical device. So that's a really important thing to get. I use the Ledger wallet and have for many years, and there are other physical hardware wallets you can look into. Highly recommend that for any amount of meaningful funds. Again, here are some wallets that I recommend. I've known Paul at Hedge Wallet for quite some time. It's a fantastic product. If you're looking to get involved in a lot more cryptocurrencies than just Bitcoin, Hedge supports many of them. He's on the board with FIO Protocol. He's a great guy, great team there. And that's edge.app. Also, my friend Ben Sigmund has been involved in helping build Bitcoin Libre. It's a very easy to use wallet. They actually have a concept of wrapping Bitcoin. So instead of the long delays that you'll get with a normal Bitcoin transaction, you get a much easier and much more simple, fast, easy experience. They also support Bitcoin Lightning, which is a layer 2 solution on Bitcoin to make it easier and faster with lower fees. You can check that out at bitcoinlibre.io. So if you want free Bitcoin, please scan this QR code and message me if you're a friend of mine. I probably shouldn't put this out this much on the internet because I'm probably not going to do this for everybody, but maybe I'll respond to you. And what this does is this gets you right into the Bitcoin Libre app, and I can send you some, maybe send you some Satoshi so you can check it out. You can install it on Android or iOS. And again, this slide is more for the talk I gave for the people in the crowd. But it was really cool. There was a small group of people in my breakout session, but I gave away $40 in Bitcoin. I gave away $5 in Bitcoin to 8 different people, and it was super seamless, super fun. So that was cool. Now, super important, backing up your wallet, the seed phrase. When you install a Bitcoin wallet, so Edge will ask for this. Well, actually, I should clarify. Edge actually has a different way of doing it, which I really appreciate. They have a mechanism where you can definitely get your seed phrase, but you can also use their kind of backup system. So they encrypt your seed phrase and they store it, and only you can decrypt it with your password. So that way, if you do lose your phone and you did forget to back up your seed phrase, you can still restore it as long as you remember your password. So it's a really cool service they provide. Bitcoin Libre doesn't prompt you for the seed phrase until you actually put money in your account. So they kind of make that onboarding experience very easy. But most wallets, right as you set up the wallet, they will ask you for your to record and save your seed phrase. So it's very important. It's usually 12, sometimes 24 words that you write these down and store them securely. Many people argue you should never even have these online, just so if your digital devices get hacked, you're not going to lose this. Now, what's so powerful and incredible about this concept is that you can also do what's called a brain wallet. You can generate a public key using these 12 words, and you can store money in there, and then you could literally walk across a border with $1 million with 12 words in your head. And nobody can stop you. And why that's so important, early days in cryptocurrency, I heard a talk where someone gave a very impassioned speech about when they were a child, their parents were literally sewing gold coins into his jacket and walking him across the border of a war-torn country, because that was their entire life savings. And they had some level of confidence that they weren't going to take off his jacket and rip it apart to steal their money at the border, because there's so much corruption when you're in a country that's torn apart by war. And that was such a powerful, just hearing him share that memory of what it was like as a child to experience that. It was such a powerful moment for me to recognize this really is a tool for freedom, where people can have self-sovereign control of their own money, and no one with guns or violence can stop it. So this makes that possible by being able to back up your wallet and restore your wallet using the seed phrase anywhere in the world. Pretty powerful stuff. So what does it mean to actually send Bitcoin? You copy the address that you want to send to, such as a deposit address at an exchange. You open up your wallet, which shows, again, the Bitcoin balance of your Bitcoin address as it exists on the Bitcoin blockchain. It doesn't actually live in your wallet. And you paste in that address to the to field and specify exactly how much Bitcoin that you want to send. And sometimes you want to be careful, but some wallets will have a way to switch between US dollar terms and Satoshis or fractions of a Bitcoin. So make sure you're clear on which one you're sending. You don't want to send like 3 Bitcoin when you meant to send, $3 in Bitcoin. So really be careful about that and double check it, triple check it. And then also, so you verify the amount in US dollar terms and Bitcoin terms, and then verify the address you're sending to. You only really have to look at the first 5 or 6 or so characters in the beginning, and then 6 or so characters at the end, and maybe check a couple in the middle. There's a checksum system where generally if those characters all match up, you have a high confidence. You don't have to check every single character. But again, if you're sending a larger amount, you might want to do that, or you might want to send a test amount and make sure that the recipient gets it before you send the full amount. Or as I mentioned earlier, if you're using the fiat protocol, you can do send with confidence using a fiat request. So like if I was going to request funds from someone, I would send a fiat request from Luke @Stokes, and people know that that's a crypto handle controlled by me, so they can verify that that request is a valid request only coming from me, because I would be the one that can send it with my private key. Some other tools that would be helpful for you is coinmarketcap.com. There are literally 10,000 plus different cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin, that are listed there. And you can use this as a really great research tool. You can find projects, you can find their websites, you can find their community, which is usually in Telegram or Discord. And you can even jump into those projects and provide value. If there's a topic of interest you have, such as AI, such as whatever it might be, most likely there's a crypto project out there that's focusing in that area. And even if you have non-technical skills, let's say you're good at marketing, or you're good at creating memes, or storytelling, or whatever your specific skill sets are, most likely there are crypto communities out there that have treasuries and worker proposals and DAOs and things that you can participate in to earn cryptocurrency. So that's something that would be very helpful for you. Again, you can search by category or search by the different projects you're looking for on CoinMarketCap. The next thing you want to understand is a block explorer. It's basically a website that lets you view the details of a transaction on a given blockchain. So when someone sends Bitcoin, the way that the whole world knows that that Bitcoin happened is they go to a block explorer, and they view the different addresses and they see the transaction and they validate, yep, okay, that's been confirmed. That now exists over here. And so sometimes this can be a little scary when you're first using crypto, is you might send it and so it leaves your wallet, but then the other person's like, oh, I haven't got it yet. Where is it? And so it's important to look at the transaction ID that your wallet will give you. Go to a block explorer. Often it'll be a link that they'll provide. And you can just click on it and it'll show you, okay, it's in transition. It's waiting for a validation, things of that nature. And again, you can use coinmarketcap.com to find the different block explorers for each cryptocurrency. There'll be a set of links for the project when you find the token. So that can be very helpful again. The other thing that you want to know about is exchanges. Again, these are not where you want to own cryptocurrency because it violates rule number 1, but they are a great place to be able to connect to your fiat bank account, purchase and get out, or the other way around. If you need to pay fiat bills, you can take your cryptocurrency, deposit on an exchange, trade for US dollars, and then send those out to your bank account. So you can also use CoinMarketCap for that. On the markets tab, it'll show you all the different exchange markets for a given cryptocurrency. And some of the common exchanges for US citizens are Coinbase.com, Kraken.com, Crypto.com, and Gemini.com, and then many others as well. Another thing you might want to look into is swaps. Swaps are websites that allow you to swap from one cryptocurrency to another without even needing an account. These are super convenient, very easy. You can just go to like simpleswap.io or changely.io, and you basically say, okay, I want to swap, let's say, Bitcoin for Ethereum. And then it'll say, okay, what's your Ethereum address? And you paste in from your wallet your Ethereum address. And this is how much do you want to swap? You say, I want to do like $100 in Bitcoin, let's say. And this is, okay, send this exact amount of Bitcoin to this deposit address, and we'll do the swap for you. So you send it off to the address, you wait for all the confirmations to happen, which again, on Bitcoin, 10 minutes per block confirmation, and it can take up to an hour for 6 confirmations before it's fully completely secured. And then they go ahead and send you the cryptocurrency. Now the swaps are usually a little more expensive than if you're adding an order to the order book on an exchange. I do recommend, if you're using an exchange, to go into the advanced tab and do an advanced trade. If you just do their like built-in swap, usually you're going to pay a lot higher fees, and the swaps are going to be higher fees as well. But if you go in there and say, okay, the price is here, I'd like to buy it, at this price, and you create depth in the order books, they usually make those fees lower because they like to have a lot of depth. It prevents slippage and some other stuff I won't get into, but that's something to consider. Swaps are very easy, but you're going to have a little higher fees. And then you have DeFi exchanges, decentralized financial tools. And this allows for token exchange, for loans, basically any financial product you can imagine is generally supported. And the way that DeFi works is the software technology that actually facilitates the financial activity is stored in what's called a smart contract on the actual blockchain. So the blockchain itself acts as the company, but in a decentralized way that facilitates your financial needs. Pretty exciting stuff. Smart contracts don't exist on all blockchains, but they do on common ones like Ethereum and Solana. Common tools on Ethereum would be Uniswap, and Solana has one called Jupiter. And again, there are many, many others. Each token that you're exploring, it's important to know which network it's on. Some tokens exist on some networks and not others. So keeping track of all that is important. And then we are going to end with this. This is the last slide. Please avoid scams. There are so many scams in the crypto space. And just like the early internet, again, I started building websites in 1996. The late 90s, it was like scam central. There was so many scams on the internet. People are like, oh man, you can't be on the internet. That's where all the child pornographers and evil people hang out. And it's just the nature of early stage adoption of technology. There's a lot of scammers, a lot of kind of fringe people out there playing with the tech. So be very, very careful. Don't ever put in more money than you're willing to lose. Don't invest in what you don't understand. My intention here is for you to be equipped with the tools to actually research and understand these things. And remember also, if something is too good to be true, it often is. Most any project that is guaranteeing you some type of yield, some type of returns, almost all of those are not legitimate. Almost all of those are scams. I unfortunately have many friends of mine who have been scammed by projects, and really they just kind of fell into the trap of their own greed. They just got too excited about the potential. They're hearing about all these other people make money and they want to make money too. And they end up sending off their crypto to untrusted websites, and just do not recommend that. Never give away your private key, never give away your seed phrase, never sign a transaction that you don't understand, because it might actually give it full control of your wallet and drain your wallet. So be very careful about these things, get informed. And And then, yeah, I recommend buying legitimate cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin or Ethereum is a really good long-term plan, and just, check back in 5 years. I say often that investing is 3 to 5 years at least. Speculation is, what's the price today? But investing is a long-term strategy. And again, this is not financial advice. This is all just for educational entertainment, but I really want to make sure you are aware of this information. I do say, the big ones are important, but there are many other projects. Some of them are fun, like meme coins and all these different speculations. And yes, they're fun, but they go up, they go down, they go all around, and you never know if they're going to be around in 5 or 10 years. Sometimes if I look back the CoinMarketCap screenshots from 10 years ago, many of those projects don't exist anymore. The top 10, they're just not even there. So be very careful on what you put your time and energy into. If it's fun and it has a great community, then awesome. I often tell people layer 0, not just layer 1, which is the what generally people call the consensus algorithm for different cryptocurrency. So Bitcoin is proof of work, for example. There's delegated proof of stake or proof of stake. That's layer 1, the technology that secures the ledger. Well, I often talk about layer 0, which is the number of human beings that believe what you're doing is valuable. If you have a strong layer 0, a strong community, that's where the real value comes from. That's where the real security comes from. So please avoid the scams. Make sure if you're going to be involved in a project that it's legitimate and there's a great community behind it. And I believe that's the end. Yep. This was for the talk we gave to fill out a form for feedback. But instead of that, you can just find me on a number of different places, I guess. LukeStokes.info. At Luke Stokes on Twitter, at Luke Stokes on Telegram, and I'm on WhatsApp and all the other things as well. Luke Stokes on Discord as well. Hope you appreciated that. That was a lot of information. If it was useful, please leave a comment, let me know. Feel free to subscribe, and feel free to share this with someone who might find it useful. And with that, we'll sign off. Take care.